Welcome to Knife Chats. If you like this video, please take a moment to leave a comment. Thank you.
As you can probably tell from the looks of things, this is going to be a video on the Scout pattern knife. This is actually my third or fourth attempt at trying to pick my top 5 Scout knives. And every time I've done this, it's been a different group of knives that have shown up. Let's see how it goes this time. Part of what I'm going to try and do here is limit myself to just one official Boy Scout knife. And then I'm also going to try and spread it around so that I don't end up just picking a bunch of 4-blade knives. I want to get a variety of different camp and scout knives showing here. And to start with, I'm going to look at official Boy Scout knives, and then I'll start looking at other patterns. Now, I could easily just choose this one here for an official Boy Scout knife as my favorite. I mean, it's the oldest official Boy Scout knife I have. It's by the New York Knife Company of Walden, New York. This one is by Hammer brand. I've done an actual video on this, and it's one of the earliest official Boy Scout knives out there. This is the second pattern that showed up, the one that has the removable bail, which is kind of an interesting feature. Like I said, I've already done a video on this knife, but you see it has a main blade, a cap lifter screwdriver, the can opener, and the punch blade. Those are the 4 blades that most people think of when they think of an official Boy Scout knife. And it would be easy to choose this and say this is my favorite Boy Scout knife, but actually this is not my favorite style of Boy Scout knife. Another cool Boy Scout knife is the 5-blade version that has the Phillips driver up front here, which is in-mounted, which is the best way to have a Phillips driver as far as I'm concerned. And then you've got your cap lifter here. The main blade, which actually drops down the middle. This one is by Camillus. It's one of the later ones by Camillus. Main blade drops right down the middle, so it's a 3-layer knife. Then on the back side you have your punch and the cap lifter screwdriver. So an additional blade was added, which is the Phillips driver. Phillips screwdrivers did not start showing up on knives until the late 1930s, because basically there weren't any Phillips screws out there until I think around 1932-33. I'll put the actual date in the video also. But this also is not my favorite official Boy Scout knife. I think everyone knows what my official Boy Scout knife favorite is. And if you follow my channel at all, you know this is my favorite Scout knife, the official Cub Scout knife, with its blade etch on their official knife, Cub Scouts. This one's by Camillus. Doesn't matter, the Imperial ones and any other new ones also fall in there as my favorite official Scout knife. One of the reasons I like it is the half stop on the main blade, and then you've got the screwdriver with the liner lock there, so it will not close up on you. You got your cap lifter on the screwdriver too, and then you've got a reamer over here also with the liner lock. Sometimes it needs a little assist, but will not fold up on you, which is pretty cool. And the best part of it though is you will rarely see this knife outside of an official Cub Scout knife. I know it was also used by the Canadian Wolf Cubs. Did not have a shield on that one, but it did have a blade etch. And I also have one other version of this knife where it is not an official Cub Scout knife, but for the most part this knife is unique to the official Cub Scouts. You rarely see it outside of there, and that's why it's one of my favorite official scouting knives, because you see plenty of 4-blade camp knives out there, and you even see this knife outside of the Boy Scouts. In fact, this knife was originally designed for Special Forces soldiers in World War II, especially ski troops and such. That's where this knife actually came from. But the official Cub Scout knife, it was made for the Cub Scouts, and it pretty much has remained an official Cub Scout knife. You don't see it outside of the Boy Scouts, and that's why this is my favorite Scout knife, or official Scout knife at least. Now there's another official 4-blade knife out there that actually predates the official Boy Scout knife, and it was from Switzerland, and that would be the Swiss soldier's knife. Now this one is from 1942, but it's close to what the one would have looked like from 1891. The first one's made by Carl Elsener, but the pattern actually was first made in Germany in 1890, and 4-blade camp knives are around even before then. But this one, well, the main blade has been modified. It was originally, I think, either a spear point or a clip point blade. There's other people who know much more about the early Swiss soldiers' knives than I do. But it does have your just a screwdriver. Did not have a cap lifter at that time, and then the old-fashioned claw-style can openers, and a punch. And that would have been your Swiss soldier's knife. Not a Swiss Army knife, that's a different knife entirely, but the Swiss soldier's knife. And the pattern continued to change over time, eventually turning into this elongated 93 millimeter knife, which is pretty cool. And it's got your 4 blades. Now it's got your can opener and screwdriver. This screwdriver can actually work on Phillips screws, and then the cap lifter screwdriver for your flathead screws. You've got your reamer and a spear master blade built on a 93 millimeter frame. Easily this could be anyone's favorite camp knife or scout knife, and if you're a fan of Victorinox knives, then I can see how anyone could pick this as their favorite. And people love the A-lock shields. I'm sorry, A-lock scales. Now this one, as you notice, does not have a bail or key ring on it, which is problematic to me. I like them to have a bail or a key ring, but most of the Swiss Army soldiers' knives did not have a bail until they came out with the 111 millimeter version, and then it has a key ring. Now, the standard issue by Wenger does have a bail, but basically it's a removable bail that goes through an open rivet there, and it's just a copy of the Swiss soldier's knife, and this is a civilian version of it, and that's why it has the bail. Pretty cool. And then you also have the Pioneer. This one is in red A-locks. People love A-locks. And it would be easy to say this is one of my favorite scout knives, but it's not. It's close, but not quite. And the reason is there's one other one that I like a little bit better, and it's because it replaces this reamer with a file. When it comes to the A-locks frames, this is my favorite of the Victorinox line when it comes to the scout pattern, or especially of the 4-blade variety, and that is the Cadet. And one of the reasons I like it better is because of its size. If you notice, this is the 93 millimeter. The Cadet is only 84 millimeters, so about 3 3/8 of an inch long. So it's a little shorter, and it's a lot more pocket friendly. You still got a main blade here, a main spear blade. You still got your can opener with the Phillips screwdriver tip, or a small flathead screwdriver, they also refer to it as. And you've got the cap lifter screwdriver. But instead of a punch or reamer blade, you have a file here, and I like this nail file. It works really well to me for not only cleaning your nails out and such, and filing them down. But this also gives you a surface for striking strike anywhere matches and such. So that comes in handy also. And that's one of the reasons I really like it. It's more pocket friendly than the slightly larger Pioneers, and it has a nail file, and I like a nail file. And if you're out there and you get a hangnail or something, you can realize real quickly how painful they can become, especially if it's a hangnail on a foot or something and you need to dig something out and you need to file down a nail. A nail file comes in real handy. And anyone who's done a lot of hiking knows the importance of proper foot care, and part of that proper foot care is taking care of your toenails. So that's one of the reasons I kind of like the Cadet over the Pioneer. A little more pocket friendly, and I like the nail file. So that's why the Victorinox Cadet is my favorite of the scalp pattern Victorinox knives. Now, before I start getting hate mail from everybody out there who collects Swiss Army knives, what I'm talking about are just the Swiss Army knives that do not have back tools. So, like, I carry an Explorer all the time, but the difference is this is a Swiss Army knife. It has the asymmetrical floating back spring, which allows 3 tools on every layer, as opposed to the regular springs on the back of these knives, which allow tools on either end but no tool in the middle of the back. And I love the Explorer. I carry it all the time, one of my favorite everyday carries, and I collect Spartans. So I have quite a few Spartans and other Swiss Army knives. But what I was talking about for my Scout and Camp knives are only the knives that have no back tools, and quite frankly those are usually the ALOX models. I suppose this video could be a whole lot shorter if I was just showing my 5 favorite knives, but I like to give a reason for why this is my favorite knife, and usually that means showing other knives in the field. So let's move on to my favorite 4-blade camp style knife. So this would be the non-official Boy Scout knife, such as this one here by Crossman. I did a video on this one already. The cool thing about this knife is it has a lock for the main blade. So you've got this wonderful liner lock on that main blade, so it won't fold up on you. Otherwise, it's your standard 4-blade Scout knife. And I've got so many others to choose from because I have well over 60 of them, and they're all different. I mean, you got the Colonial Sportsman, you got the Camp Buddy, you got the Forest Master, you got the Camp Master, you got the Camp King. I mean, there's so many versions of unofficial Scout knives that you could go nuts collecting them. I obviously already have gone nuts collecting them, but what's my favorite? Well, let me give you a hint. It came out in 1944 and then was released one more time in 1945. It's originally known as the MILJ, military jackknife, later became the military knife, or MILK, or milk knife, also known as the 818, the general utility knife, the mess tin knife, the demo knife. It's got a lot of names. By Camillus, it was known as the S1760, Sierra 1760. This was probably one of the first knives I ever bought with my own money. I had knives before this, but I bought this one with my own money, and or this style of knife with my own money, and have loved them ever since. Really simple construction, stainless steel used throughout, 440 stainless on the main blades. I don't know what stainless is used on the handles. I believe it's a lower level of stainless steel. The back springs have the 440 stainless steel back springs also, though. The unique thing about this knife is the safety can opener. This is the first knife to ever have this style of can opener. Not by Camillus, but by Kingston. And we have one of those back here. Notice the can opener is on the opposite end. It was developed during World War II, the can opener, simply because soldiers were hurting themselves with the old style can opener and missing days from the front line. So the military needed a new style of can opener, and that's how this can opener came about. As for the stainless steel handles and stuff, that was also out of necessity because the other knives were just falling apart in the humidity of the South Pacific. Originally, knives back in that time during World War II were not using brass liners. They were used in 1941 and 1940, but then when the war actually started, brass was needed for other needs, and so in 42 and 43 they stopped using brass, and then in 1944 this is one of the first knives to end up with brass liners again for Army issue or military issue. And so there's a lot to this knife. I'll probably have to do a whole video on just these knives. But this knife has a special place for me, and I just really like this style of knife, and it is definitely one of my favorites. It's built like a tank. You can beat things with it and everything else. It's just a solid, well-made knife. Camillus started making them in 1957. They have a little stud on them. You know what? I gotta stop talking about this because I could end up going for hours on this knife. Let's just know that this knife, the milk knife, is my number 3 choice and probably actually my number 1 choice of knives. Okay, so we're going to revisit these in another video because this is on my top 5, not my favorite. A knife that I traded is another knife that has to be mentioned though in my favorites. I've already done a video on the 108mm knives, so I don't have to go too long into that. But I actually traded my first ever milk knife or demo knife for one of these, and I still love this knife. I know you're thinking, wait a minute, you already did Victorinox. Well, this one isn't by Victorinox. This one is CCM. So it's a different company. But it's the German Army knife, and I cannot think of a better camp knife to have out there. This knife is just terrific. You've got a very long Spearmaster blade. You have a saw blade on there. You have a cap lifter and also can opener. This is a combo tool. You got your screwdriver tip there. You've got a corkscrew. Yeah, I know a lot of people would rather have a Phillips driver, but you got a corkscrew for that bottle of wine. You know, if you got a girlfriend with you, or a wife, or any special other, then that corkscrew will be real helpful with the bottle of wine on the picnic. And then you've got your reamer here. So just a terrific knife. I've already talked. I've got a video on the German Army knife already, so I don't have to go any further on that. And also got one on all of the 108mm knives. So this is another one of my favorites. Hard to argue with this one. So that leaves us with one more knife. I've already talked about 4. So let's talk about one more of my favorite Camp Scout knives. So what can I choose here? I got this really interesting 6-blade knife by Mercury. But I can roll this one out because basically it's a Swiss Army knockoff, but it is pretty cool, especially considering it's got a fork here. But like I said, this is really a Swiss Army knockoff. I'm going to have to do a video on my 5 favorite Swiss Army knockoffs out there. So we're not going to go with that one. Then there's always the hobo knives. This one's by Colonial. You know, you got your fork, your spoon. We got the your clip blade, and then your can opener. Always kind of like the hobos. Maybe I'll do another video. This is not one of my favorites, especially the one by Colonial. I think I like the one by Coleman much better than that. Let's see, what else could there be? Well, I got these two here by Remington, which are pretty cool. Now this one is a Trailmaster, and this one, if you're familiar with Boker made this knife way back as far as 1860, and it's a really cool knife. And you got, on the back side, you've got a pretty long reamer, and then you've got a pretty long corkscrew here. And then you've got the other main blades up here on top. You've got your screwdriver, cap lifter, a can opener, then a main blade. Like I said, this one's by Remington. And then a clip blade. So a really cool knife. And I also like the fact that you've got the bail up on top here. So when you open up your main blade, the bail's out of the way. You know, you're not going to end up interfering, and when you're closing it, the knife doesn't hit the bail, which happens with a lot of knives. So this is pretty cool. But I also got this other Remington, which is pretty cool too. So maybe that would be my favorite. That one's here, and it's pretty cool. And what I like about this one is you got this blade here, which can act as both a bone saw for cutting through fish bone and stuff, and also as a wood saw, but I think it's really designed mainly for cutting through bone. And then you got your main blade, and then your can opener, and then your screwdriver and cap lifter. So also pretty cool. So it's basically your 4-blade camp knife, but you have this additional saw on it, which is kind of cool. And of course the bail is going to get hit, but it's a nice long bail. But hard to choose between these two, which I would choose for my favorite for this last 5th spot. I mean, either of them could easily be there. But then I remembered something. These Remington knives, they were actually made by Camillus. So I can skip those because I've got an easy out. They're made by Camillus, and I've already chosen a knife by Camillus for one of my favorites, so I can skip that. See how you do that when you make up your own rules? And that way I have spot left for one more knife. And that leaves me with this knife back here, which is by Case. I haven't picked one by Case yet, but this is really one of my favorite patterns of knives by Case overall. And this is their Junior Scout, and this particular one is in stag, so it really looks nice. Now, there's nothing really special about it other than, you know, it's a smaller scout knife. You've got a can opener here, a screwdriver and cap lifter here, reamer on the back side, and then the small pin blade, just like any other 4-blade camp knife. The only difference is it's much smaller. It's only 3 3/8 inches long. So compared to a regular Boy Scout knife, this is a 3 5/8 inch one. You can see it's quite a bit shorter. If you look at it compared to a 3 3/4 inch one, you can see it's much smaller, much more pocket friendly, going to fit in your pocket a whole lot better. And when you consider this one is with stag, genuine India stag, that just says everything about it. The fact that you can remove the bail if you wanted to is pretty cool also. And the finish and fit on this is just fantastic. I've already did a video on comparing this knife to the Cub Scout knife. Very similar in size. I just really like this knife, so that's why this one is going to be here. Whereas the Remingtons, I got an easy out. I can say they were made by Camillus. They're really terrific knives, but I'm going to have to go with the Case. So recapping, what are my 5 favorites? I'll try and go in the order of 5 through 1. Number 5, the Victorinox Cadet. Number 4, the official Cub Scout knife. Number 3, the German Army knife. Number 2, the Case Junior Scout. And last but not least, number one, the S1760 or MIL-K818 General Utility Knife used by the U.S. military. There you have it, my top 5. Not an easy choice for me to make. As you can probably tell from all the other Scout knives that I had to pull out just to go through here and come up with a top 5. And you know what the scariest part of this is? If I were to do this video next week, I'd probably end up with different knives. Except for that demo knife, I know that would be probably my number one knife.
I know this is a long video. I appreciate everybody who stuck around to the end here. Wish I could give you some ice cream or something as a treat, but all I can really do is say thanks for sticking around for this. It's really hard to go over top 5s when you're actually trying to compare them to other knives that just didn't quite make the list. Several of these knives could easily be in a top 5 list for me, but I had to settle on 5, and that's what I've done. I'd love to know what your thoughts are on this, and I'd also love to know what your top 5 ALOX knives are, or what your top 5 camp knife is, or why you wouldn't choose one of these over some other knife that you have. In any case, again, apologize for how long it was, but I'm glad you stuck around, and thanks for supporting the channel. Thank you so much for joining us. I hope you enjoyed this episode of Knife Chats, and if you did, please like and share it with your friends. Comments are always welcome. Don't forget to subscribe and ring that notification bell so you'll know when the next episode of Knife Chats is up online. Thanks again. Hope to see you soon.